This is really handy integration. We'll also be able to not only see those results, but report metrics within our testing tool. It means that we'll be able to get all of the information of our tests themselves from directly within Salesforce. We'll be able to orchestrate that execution very granularly. And that's predominantly done with points and clicks and a couple of copy pastes of some access tokens. So the integration is very tight. I've closed those windows down. And what we're looking at right now is the dashboard for a demo project within our Copado Robotic testing platform. All that I've done in the background is logged into robotic.copado.com. This does live at its own URL, and the reason being is that we are platform agnostic. And what I mean by that is that we can test not just Salesforce, but any other systems that you have in a browser or on a phone. Do you folks have mobile apps today?
Yes, for testing, yeah.
And are those custom mobile apps, or are you testing Salesforce mobile? Or is it mobile browser even?
No, it's a native mobile app.
Got it. And is that an application that you own?
That's owned by CSL, correct?
Okay, got it. So the reason I ask is, and I'll show this a little bit later, is we have the ability to test mobile purely in the cloud without requiring you to do any local developer setup or any management of software or hardware.
Okay.
But to that point, if it lives in the browser or on your phone, we can test it. On the left-hand side here, you'll see, I'm sorry, to back up here. All I've done is I've logged into this website using my username and password. We also have Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, SSO. I've selected a project and I'm greeted with this dashboard. This dashboard is configured out of the box. I can look at test run trends and I can select specific test suites and date ranges and intervals if I want to just get a general health report. Personally, I come in here and I look for the big green circle because this environment, if I have a big green circle, tells me that when I go to show you folks a demo, my coworkers and I are not going to have live failures. Looks like I do need to do some updating of a couple test cases here, though. On the left-hand side of our project, we've got multiple robots. You can think of these as your automation workers, if you will. We've got Robot De Niro and Automaton Hanks, Moby, our mobile testing device. You can create an army of these to do your tasks. The robots then contain the hyperlinks which you see here, which are our test assets themselves. So clicking on one of these, you'll see a test suite dashboard. Actually, let me just restart my testing scenario there. There we go. You'll see a test suite dashboard with historic runs. These are immutable, so you have an audit trail of everything your automation has done. We have links. If I click on a failed test case, let's go back to our scenario here where, let's say I was a developer and I'm working on this, the test case failed. I can click on that. It takes me right to the link and right to the place in the detailed step-by-step log where the test case failed, and it automatically places a screenshot in there for me. Now, I can tell personally that this is actually a defect. It's telling me that it couldn't find some text when I clearly see on the screen. So maybe I'm a QA and this is a real defect. I want to report that. I can click on Create Ticket and Bug and create a ticket directly in Jira with the link to that detailed report with screenshots and a link to a video recording of the test execution. So I can't count how much time I've spent, maybe wasted, doing replication steps where I'm doing some kind of software testing and I realize, oh, that's broken. Let me go turn on my screen recorder and do it again. So reproduction steps, you can save a lot of time in communication by having this generated for you.
Just one question. This is all about reporting. How exactly we have configured our test cases? Like, is it on the basis of XPath or how step-by-step configuration we have done? Like, how does tool knows, like, in this way we need to execute all these things?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And maybe the most important one. So a couple other things happening on this dashboard here that I'll gloss over. We will come back here, but just to call out, this is where we can integrate with test data, point and click for any spreadsheet formats. This is where we would integrate with version control. We do recommend you use a cloud-based version control. You own your own test scripts. We also have a built-in scheduler and Team Slack and email notifications. That being said, the next thing we'll do is click on Launch Queue Editor, which takes us to our cloud-based IDE. And this is the view that you would have when you're developing or debugging a test script. The next thing I'll do is click on Live Test in the top right-hand corner. I'm going to zoom in on the font a few times while that's loading up. So now I have a test file and a browser open. We have a handful of different ways to view our tests. Right now we're looking at a script view, which is a top to bottom line by line of the entire file. We also have a flow editor available. If I click on this toggle in the top right-hand corner and then select a test case, you'll see that we can view our test cases as symbolic representations, or I can view it in a script. I'll switch to script view so we get more information on our screen today, and let's just run a couple of lines of automation. So we're in a test cases section. Again, this is completely software as a service, all in the cloud. All I had to do was log in with my username and password. We've spun up the browser session for you on our hardware. I'll run the first line here, and it's go to copado.com. The next line is click text, talk to sales. And so the first takeaway, hopefully, is that everybody in the room knows what's going to happen when I run line 16. You don't need to be a Selenium or an automation engineer or any kind of software developer to know that click text, talk to sales. Well, it's probably going to click on this button here that says talk to sales. And we'll run that and we'll see the nice blue square highlight. And it takes us to our next page. I want to go back really quickly and talk about why this is different. We are targeting the human visible text rather than underlying code or relative XPath. That enables a couple major differences. First is that this is legible. And second is that this is very, very resilient. If we compare it to the way that most tools are operating, either a developer will do this themselves or a tool will abstract this for you. They're going to be, oops, not mobile, selecting the element they want to interact with, copying off or finding some locator, whether that's a class, an ID, a CSS, a selector, or a relative XPath. And so that's what we have on lines 20 and 21. The big issue with this is that is a prohibitive task. You need to be familiar with Chrome DevTools or whichever DevTool you're using. You need to be familiar with HTML, front-end frameworks, DOM structure, and things like that. You need to be familiar with XPaths, and they are not easy to read. Click element contains class secondary button W button, or click element HTML body div 2 div header. These are not legible. I'm not going to look at this and tell you exactly what that does, whereas click text, talk to sales, very self-explanatory and self-documented. Now I'm going to run line 20 really quickly because I want to point out that we still have all of the standard tools available to you. I'm not going to take any tools away from the developer. You kick and scream when you do that. But this type of XPath should be our absolute last resort. There are still scenarios where it makes sense to use an XPath, but we found they're very few and far between these days. Big issue, though, is not only is this hard to read, if it breaks, I can't run it. And it's very likely to break because what we've determined is that the underlying code or the relative XPath, these are both very brittle to layout changes and code changes, whereas text is only brittle to user experience changes. And if we think about the way that that works, user experience is much less likely to change than our underlying code and layout. If you think about Amazon.com, for example, the search bar on Amazon.com has said search for more than a decade, and it will stay search, I'm willing to bet, for more than a decade. And the underlying code on that search bar is likely to change daily or weekly. So targeting text allows us to make tests that are very resilient and stable, which is really an issue when Salesforce is updating. Once you get to that 100 test case mark or more, you end up hiring an FTE just to do maintenance on existing test cases. And that's where Copado was at when we sought to find a solution for that problem. And then, of course, it's very legible. Yes, please.
Like click test, I understand it's a keyword. Like if you want to click on some particular button or something on the Salesforce, then we can make use of it. However, somewhere in the background, we might have given the XPath for this talk to cells in order to identify this thing. Because suppose in UI in Salesforce, some like new tab is coming or new button is coming, then how is it going to identify? Is there any option like we need to add the XPath for that?
You should not need to use an XPath. And actually, I'll just explain the targeting strategy here. One moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that, folks. I've got some pollen outside. It's shutting me down. So let's talk about the targeting strategy. Because we're not targeting XPath as our first choice, let me scroll down here on the Copado website and find some ambiguous text. And so I'm going to give myself some white space here. You'll notice where it says learn more a handful of different times. This is a rotating carousel as well. I'm going to use a keyword named verify text, and that would put a nice blue square over the text that I want. By default, Copado will find the first case-sensitive partial match of your text. And you see it puts the nice blue square on the one to the far left there that it rotated off. If that does not work, then we'll look at using either an exact match or an anchor of other text or an index. So I can tell the tool to find the second occurrence of learn more, and it highlights the second one on the screen that it can find. Most commonly, we'll use a text-based anchor, so I will say, find the one closest to this other text if you find multiple, and that'll find the one near business analysts here. In most scenarios, using text, partial or exact match, index, or anchor, we'll get the right element targeted, and we don't need to go any more complicated. And the big benefit there is that this is still very resilient to change. It's not tightly coupled to any code or layout. It's still very easy to read. If none of those options work, then we choose one of our two other options. The first one that I would choose is Q Vision. So these keywords, all of the actions on the left we refer to as keywords, verify text, etc. We have a series of keywords that operate using computer vision AI and OCR, or object character recognition. What it does is it uses the AI to snap the screen, identifies every Unicode character, so any letters in any language, any numbers, any emojis, things like that, and then our tool will target those labels instead of the underlying HTML. The huge benefit here is that allows me to work with elements where there is no HTML accessible at all. So iframes, PDFs, HTML previews, or documents of that sort, we can automate them all in the same flows without needing to change contexts. Finally, if that is not the best option, then we would go to using an XPath, as you've mentioned. So we try not to use the XPath, but there are scenarios where it makes sense. If I'm targeting an element with no text whatsoever, then I may want to use an XPath if I can find a stable XPath. So by default, we try to find partial matching text and then various text-based anchoring solutions. Then we'll go to computer vision AI. Then we'll go to using an XPath. Is that clear up?
Yes.
And so again, the issue with the XPath that we were encountering ourselves is that Salesforce updates, underlying code changes, we end up fixing test cases where there was not actually a functional regression. So that's a two-part problem. One, the rework itself is expensive. It's monotonous. Nobody likes going in and redoing the same thing they've already done 2 or 3 times in a year. And then two, when our test cases are failing, the majority of the time it's not actually a functional regression. It really damages the confidence in our quality process. You're a lot more likely to let something sneak through into prod if the last 10 times there was an issue, you knew it was really a non-issue. Whereas quick text talk to sales will not break unless my user can't click on a button that says talk to sales anymore. So my test scenario should not care if the underlying code changes. Honestly, my test scenario shouldn't care if the talk to sales button gets flipped upside down, turned pink, and moved to the other side of the page. As long as my user can still go to this website, they still click on this button, and they still fill out this form, I want that test case to pass. I'll fill out the rest of this here, and you'll notice it's just type text, first name, Marty, last name, McFly, drop down, the value of the drop down's label, the value that we'd like to select. Nothing terribly tricky happening here. I'm going to run a keyword on line 36 here that says home. If I hover over it, you'll see it says it navigates to the home page, logs in if needed. So I'll run that really quickly, and we'll see that it's navigating to our home page. It's being told, hey, you need to log in, and then it's logging in. We want to be able to create our own reusable functionality. So anytime you find yourself creating repetition, you can create a keyword out of that and reuse it. For example, if I wanted to fill out this form that we just filled out as a part of multiple different test scenarios, I could cut that out and create its own keyword named form fill, for example. However, over that it says this requests a demo, very similar to what we just did. On that same token, the home keyword, if I hover over it, says it comes from the library common. So if I scroll up to the very top, you'll notice in our settings section, we're grabbing another file. I'll take a look at that file. It's that common file. Within that common file, there's a keyword section. Keywords are where we place our own custom reusable functionality. So if I scroll down and look at the home keyword, this is a great way to have teams of mixed skill sets collaborating together. We want our manual QAs, our automation engineers, our UAT testers, our software developers, preferably all on the same platform, so that I can collaborate with everybody. So as an end user, I see home. I know that it navigates to the home page and logs in if needed. That's really all I need to understand. This building block has been created for me. It's documented. I can use it. Under the hood, that keyword is going to our home URL, waiting a few seconds, checking to see whether or not we're being told we need to log in. If we're being told we need to log in, then we're running a login keyword. We go and we look for the login keyword here, and we'll see that that's going to our login URL, typing our username and password, and then deciding if it needs to handle multi-factor authentication and one-time passwords. But again, as an end user, I don't need to understand all of that that's going on under the hood for me, because somebody has created documentation that says navigates to the home page and logs in if needed. To create that custom functionality, it's just a matter of chopping out whatever you'd like to repeat and pasting it into a keyword section, and then you can reuse that. We'll look at the rest of the test case in Salesforce. Very simple. We're navigating to the leads page in Salesforce. We're launching our sales app, and we're verifying that this lead was generated. And so a couple of takeaways here is one, that this is end-to-end. This is our website into Sales Cloud, but this could be any number of other Salesforce clouds or other web applications or really anything in the browser. The other is that In our website, we use Click Type Verify. In Salesforce, we use Click Type Verify. So there are nuances, and we do provide a special package of automation for Salesforce specifically to make common actions easier, like verifying fields or working with the Salesforce metadata API. But at the end of the day, most everything is going to be automated with the three keywords Click Type Verify. And that makes it very easy to pick up and run with the tool. I believe Ponsa, the folks that are running 1,000, I think it was 1,000 test cases, Dan. If you don't remember off the top of your head, no worries. They have 15 keywords in their automation. And so it's type text, drop down, quick list, click text, and pretty much once you've got that, there are a couple of edge cases, and we have wonderful documentation to get through that. But at the end of the day, it's all very samey because we're platform agnostic. That is what executing the test looks like, and if I wanted to author the tests in the way that a standard developer would, I've got my IntelliSense. I could say maybe I wanted to verify that we found no potential duplicates, and you'll see it's suggesting things to me. I can hit return and run that line. I get a nice blue square over here. But maybe I don't want to build the automation in that way. We also have a couple of other ways. We have the flow editor that I've mentioned before, where we can drag and drop our steps in from a center palette. Pardon me. Maybe I wanted to click on some text. I can drag that step and I can drop it in. I'll get a nice big red square that tells me exactly what I need to do. I get IntelliSense autocomplete just like the developers using the script mode would. And again, it's purely a matter of personal preference, whichever mode you use. We also have a recorder. So if I imagine I'm doing a manual test, maybe I have a test that's not even documented. It's just something that I know as a user that I have to get done as tribal knowledge, make sure this works before release, right? I can click on Record Test at the top here. And now instead of driving the browser on the right with the automation on the left, I'm going to manually drive the browser on the right to generate the automation on the left. So I'll click on Leads, I'll click on New. The tool automatically recognizes that I'm in a modal, plug in some dummy values here. I think I just called myself a dummy. And you'll see as I'm generating or as I'm doing this work on the right, it's generating that automation for me on the left. Click cancel instead of save. Typical workflow would be to turn on that recorder, do the bite-sized chunk that I need to work with, give this a once-over with my human eyeballs so I'm not blindly trusting the AI. That does look good to me. I don't think I need to make any corrections. And then run that selection. And so now in about the same amount of time it took me to do this manual test, I've created and documented a functional piece of automation. Now, I'm sure you'll notice this is rudimentary. There are some hard-coded values and such, which is not necessarily bad, but what we'll often see is a second pass will be taken on this, where we'll do things like parameterizing it. So maybe I have a phone number coming from a data sheet. Maybe my first name is randomly generated so I can avoid duplication issues and things like that. We also have something called Salesforce Guidance, which allows me to select a record type and then fill that record. So if you'll notice what I did was I took this step named Fill Lead and dragged it and dropped it in, and this will generate all of the functional automation that I need to fill in a lead. So all of those steps that we recorded, this is really handy if we have forms with hundreds of fields and we want to check them in a very robust way. Even with the recorder, that would be error-prone and monotonous to go through one at a time, whereas this fills in the automation automatically for me. Anywhere there's a default value, it fills that in for me. And all I need to do is go through here and plug in test data or references to test data.
So if you enter test data, which is not acceptable by Salesforce, will it leave that field blank or it will still answer the incorrect test data?
It would enter the incorrect test data.
Okay. Even if it is not acceptable by Salesforce.
Let's try to give an example here.
Because in our Salesforce, I think you cannot enter special characters in first name and last name. So say if we put a numeric value and a special character in the left side, will it still insert that in the on Salesforce?
It depends on if Salesforce is flatly blocking the characters from being input or if it's just showing an error when I try to save. In your scenario, I think it might even be a good negative test to try to put a special character in first name, click save, and then verify that the error message you're expecting will pop up.
Exactly.
Really, pardon me, sorry guys. Really common scenario. I did want to talk about another excellent method of generating automation. So you folks mentioned you're on the path to getting that 40% or whatever your target was for having your tests automated. So I assume you have a large amount of manual tests. Are those tests documented in some way, or do we have a lot of tribal knowledge crystallized?
Sorry, was there a question? I was talking to someone.
I'm sorry, I should have asked it in a better way. How are our non-automated tests documented?
They're documented in Jira.
Wonderful. So you have test definitions in Jira?
Yeah.
That's excellent. So I'm going to flip tabs to Copado GPT. Copado GPT is Copado's LLM trained on Salesforce, software quality, testing, automation, software delivery, pipelines, anything in that SDLC. And it's excellent at answering questions around them. So there are, just like Copado Robotic testing, this is, it's been 2 years and some change that we've been selling this product at Copado. And what I remarked in the first year is that what we thought were the best use cases were good, but there are major use cases that we hadn't even considered until we got this into the hands of customers and they said, oh, you can do this with it. Similarly, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas that we are using today and I know give value from Copado GPT, but I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now we have use cases that we hadn't even thought of that came up from customers and internal users being creative. The first one is using this to document, to navigate our documentation. We're an enterprise software tool. We have a lot of documentation. It's fairly well laid out. But that being said, it can be a quagmire if you're a brand new user trying to learn a new tool with hundreds of articles of documentation. So I can ask it questions. So how do I You can ask it any types of questions and it will answer that. And then most importantly, it's going to spit out the documentation from Copado that it's used to answer your questions so you can verify that that's right. That's one really good and really easy way to start using this and get immediate value. This is something that Copado has started using internally with our support team, and we've had, I think it was a 64% improvement in our response time for support tickets. Because our level 1 support is now able to use this tool, get links to the documentation, share those links with customers, and get problems sorted at that level 1 very quickly. For testing purposes, we have the ability to create test assets out of various other assets. So, for example, let's say I had in Jira a definition of some test steps. I could ask the tool to create a testing scenario or script automation for that. So it'd say, given the following test steps, and I'll paste in my test steps. Keywords are what we call our keyword functionality that we provide to you. And so this is going to use AI, and it's going to generate Copado Robotic testing script for me that I should be able to paste in. Now, I want to set the disclaimer. I would not expect the AI to give me perfect code that I can copy paste every time. What I do expect it to give me is something that's going to be a whole heck of a lot faster than starting from a blank white page. While that's thinking, I'm going to pull open our user story again, if you'll remember. And I want to call out ways that we're implementing this AI within our platform. So one of those ways, and this is available today to Copado users, through the DevOps Exchange, we can install the Copado AI Companion. Opening that up with the global actions here, you'll see that the AI Companion has a list of predefined prompts. I can also define my team's own prompts here. And I can do things like asking it to improve the user story details. And it will take all of these empty fields and the values that it does have, and the technical specifications and the functional specifications, and it will create improvements to the user stories details for us. For our scenario, let's say I have a user story to build out some brand new functionality. We're not quite at test-driven development, right? We haven't developed our tests before our functionality, but we know that we want testing done as soon as possible on this new thing we're creating. So I can ask it to take those functional and technical specifications, pardon me, and use those to create a test. So this should look not too dissimilar from a test definition in Jira. We've got our title, we've got the definition of our test, the description, we have our prereqs and our expected result. That is going to shore up this user story in a very great way from a quality standpoint, but let's take it a step further and ask it to go ahead and create an automation script from that test that it's generated. And so you'll see it is now from zero created a test script and a definition for me. And now using that definition that it's created, it's creating a test step for me. It's even commented it for me. If I go back to Copado GPT, you'll see it's finishing it out the answer for our Encino test here. And this could be anything. This is just some manual test steps that I had handy. But you'll see we've asked it to create the CRT script. It's got a test cases section very similar to what we see here. And it has all of the steps, and it's created comments as well. So not only has the AI generated what we need to do, it's documented it, telling it what it's supposed to do. And anywhere that it did not complete the automation for you, will also fill in a comment that says, hey, you need to do this part yourself. It's then going to explain what it came out. And it's going to tell us anywhere that we need to replace default values or placeholder values that it has provided for us.